Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we are going to be talking about Shining Spears, and I'm going to be addressing the controversy about them because a lot of people seem to think that they are complete garbage. And I would like to make the point that I think a lot of people are very much underestimating the Shining Spears because I actually think they're one of the better units. Now, I don't think they're one of the best aspect warriors, but they're certainly not terrible. Let's put it that way. Now, I do think that they do need some support in some fashion because they are the most expensive aspect warrior, but for the price you pay, you get some really cool special rules that are actually very effective and can, allow you to do things that other aspect warriors just can't do. So without further ado, let us go ahead and dive right in. So first, we are going to be generally going over the stats, weapons, and special rules of the Shining Spears. We're going to be talking about their strengths and weaknesses, combos and synergies that they can be a part of, and some great quote-unquote hacks to using Shining Spears effectively in your games. So, starting off with their stat line, they have the basic jet bike stat line. The Exarch has an extra wound, and the Shining Spears have a 3+ save. So movement 14, toughness 4, 3+ save, 2 wounds, leadership 6, and OZ 2. They're basically Space Marines in their durability, but of course way faster. And they do have a 5+ invulnerable save as well. As for their ranged weapons, they have the Laser Lance, which is a damage 3, strength 6, AP -2 weapon. It does have the assault keyword, which is important, and it only has a 6-inch range in one attack, which is kind of the weak point of this weapon, is that the range is so low. The Exarch can take a shuriken cannon instead of the twin shuriken catapults, and it does have lethal hits. Otherwise, it's exactly the same as a shuriken cannon. The Exarch can take the Star Lance, which is the best loadout for the Exarch, has assault, but instead of strength 6 and AP -2, it has strength 9, AP -3. And the other 2 Shining Spears, or other 5 Shining Spears, however large you're going to take the unit, is going to come with twin shuriken catapults, which are just a little bit of extra damage, maybe a tiny bit of chip damage, a wound here and there, nothing much to write home about. For their melee weapons, here's really where they get most of their punch. The Laser Lance has 3 attacks, hitting on a 3+, strength 5, AP -2, and damage 3, anti-monster and vehicle 3+, and the Lance keyword. So against Marines, they're wounding on 2+, and against most other targets, monsters and vehicles, they're rolling on a 3+, which is quite good. AP -2 is a little tiny bit low, but it is still quite good when you consider most opponents are going to be wanting to hit are going to have a 3+ armor save. The Paragon Saber is an option for the Exarch. It's essentially 6 attacks, hitting on 3+, strength 5, AP -2, damage 2, has more attacks, but doesn't have any of the special rules. The Paragon Saber, guys, is Garbo. You never want to take this. It's not good. Where's the anti-monster, anti-vehicle 3+, right? Unfortunately, it's not there, so we can kind of write this one off. The Star Lance is what you're going to be wanting to take. It's 4 attacks, strength 5, AP -3, damage 3, and has the same special rules as the Laser Lance. So it just has an additional attack and additional AP as well. As for the abilities of the Shining Spears, they have extreme mobility. Each time they make a normal, advance, fallback, or charge move, you can ignore any vertical distance when determining the total distance models in this unit can be moved during that move. This essentially means they ignore all terrain features. So that is extremely insane. This is what people were hoping for. And I think it's ironic that so many Eldar players were basically begging for this ability for Shining Spears to have. And then once they were given this ability, a lot of those same players said, nope, Shining Spears still suck. Even though GW gave them exactly what they wanted. So I found that a little bit ironic. I think Shining Spears last edition, or not last edition, excuse me, in the index, it seems like another totally different edition, they'll have to say, with this new codex. But with the index, people were begging for Shining Spears to get some sort of ability like this. And of course, I thought Shining Spears at 90 points were a decent unit. They were a good unit at that price point for what they had in the index. People disagreed then, said they needed more damage, said they needed more mobility. GW listened to you guys and they gave you exactly what you wanted, and you're still complaining. So I think that is a little crazy. So anyway, that is an extremely good ability. As far as the war gear abilities that they have, the Exarch can take a Shimmer Shield, which gives them a 4+ invul save. Kind of like makes them like a mini character almost. Pretty good. 4+ invul save. Not going to say no to that. It's free. As for the war gear options, of course, the Shining Spear can take the Shining Spear Exarch can take the Paragon Saber or Star Lance, and can take a Shuriken Cannon instead of the Shuriken Catapult, and of course be armed with the Shimmer Shield. As far as their unit composition, they can be taken in squads of 3 or 6. 3 of them are going to be 120 and 6 of them are going to be 240. I think the points is where a lot of people are a little bit on the fence about this unit, because for their price point, they don't seem to do that much in a lot of detachments. So I will say this. They look like a anti-vehicle, anti-monster unit on paper. I'm going to tell you guys right now, they're not really this. They're not. They have that because they need some way to deal with things that are not in their primary target, right? Their primary specialization, I should say. They need ways to deal with those types of units, but they're not a dedicated anti-monster, anti-vehicle unit. I was never for anti-monster, anti-vehicle on Shining Spears. I will say that. But GW listened to you guys. A lot of you guys in the community wanted that, and they gave it to you. However, what it does do is it allows them to possibly go into other targets. Things that are a little bit on the lighter side. 3+ armor save. Not a lot of wounds. Things like, light vehicles, stuff like that. They can do some decent damage into those targets. But the primary thing you want to go after with these guys is elite 3-wound infantry. That's what they're best at. That's what they're best at killing. Because they have that strength 5, anything toughness 4 is going to be wounded on 2s. And they have that good AP. So, elite infantry that has 3 wounds typically has a 3-up or 2-up save. So you're going to get right to their invul. And that's really what they want to be hitting. As far as the number of Shining Spears, 3 of them I think is the sweet point for a lot of those kind of trades against their specialized target. And if you're going to kind of trade up in other stuff like vehicles, you could possibly make up your points worth even if you don't kill the whole target. And that's the other thing that we're going to talk about is, do they actually trade effectively against a lot of enemies out there? Right? Because they are pretty expensive. Regardless of the special abilities that they have on the datasheet, I think they really do need some extra support because they are at a high price point. And of course, for their keywords, they have the Fly, Mounted, Aspect Warriors, and Shining Spear keywords, all things that we kind of assumed that they would have. Okay, let's talk about their strengths and weaknesses. As far as their strengths go, they are very fast and maneuverable. Being able to move up to 16 inches with a battle focus token and being able to just move straight through ruins is very quick. They are the undisputed quickest unit in our codex. They're also the hardest hitting of all Aspect Warriors between their shooting and combat. They will do straight up more damage than any other Aspect Warrior unit, with the exception of fire dragons against vehicles and monsters. Their weaknesses, however, are that they are fragile for the points. 120 points for 3 Space Marines, essentially, is not that durable, but we're Eldar. This is something we already know. They also only have 6 inches on their laser lances range attack, which just sucks. I always thought that this should be a 12-inch weapon, but unfortunately, it is just still 6 inches. Womp womp, right? That does mean that they do have to maneuver themselves correctly to be able to get the maximum effect. They're also more difficult to hide, and at times they do engage in combat with their large bases awkwardly. So because they have large, kind of 40 millimeter bases, sometimes when they're trying to get into enemy units, especially those hiding behind ruins, your opponent can place the unit in such a way that you're going to have to make a longer charge. All right, so let's talk about the combos and synergies. First, in Aspect Host. Aspect Host makes these guys hit a lot harder and more reliably. They're able to ignore modifiers in combat, which is really useful to keep their damage levels high, right? Being a damage 3 weapon, if anything has -1 damage, that's already really bad for these guys. And being able to ignore things like Armor of Contempt is important too. The rerolls are useful as well, so there is that. In Windrider Host, giving them advance and charge increases their threat range by a significant amount, and being able to be brought back into reserves can also be useful in fringe cases. Also, if these guys are able to kill a unit with their range attack, they can move 7 inches and then charge something even further down. So it is rare that they're going to kill something with their range attacks, but in Windrider Host specifically, you have a ton of anti-marine units that can, chip marines down to like, a squad of 5 to like 4 models. You can move this unit up, kill that unit with laser lances for shooting and shuriken cannons and catapults and all that stuff, and then you can propel them 7 inches more and then charge something downfield. That's not that far-fetched, right? In Ynnari, they're also pretty good because they can use Lethal Intent to move an insane distance of 16 inches with a Battle Focus token, which is, also going to be moving through buildings and stuff like that. And they can follow up with a charge the next turn guaranteed. And here's the best part. If someone charges them, there is a 2 CP stratagem that allows them to fight on death. So this means that Shining Spears can get back their value much easier in a Ynnari detachment. Of course, I do think Ynnari are a little bit, well, I'll say this, they're a little bit OP right now. I think there is going to be a targeted nerf against them soon. So this is something they may not be always able to do. But still, even saying that, Lethal Intent would still be good on these guys, even if it was capped to 7 inches. Or something along those lines. Guide can allow them to hit a bit harder in combat and shooting against their target. It's something you don't normally think about, but if you throw Guide on, let's say, Dreadnought, these guys can hit a lot more reliably and perhaps even kill it in combat. And lastly, they love most of the battle focus options. You absolutely have to use the tokens on these guys to get the most out of them, and they're very hungry for them. They want to use maybe 2 tokens per turn on average, and maybe even a 3rd token when you're shot at. So you do have to keep battle focus tokens around for them during the first couple turns of the game when these guys are going to be operating, or later in the game if you're playing with more of a late game kind of strategy with this unit. All right, everybody, here we have a couple of examples of how to use Shining Spears on the battlefield. So I mentioned that I was going to show you, quote unquote, a couple of hacks that this unit can do. And I just basically want to show you some of the tricks that you can do with them so you can have some success on the battlefield. So one thing that many people are going to do and probably kind of fall for in the early game is charging these guys out early. So I've kind of set up some positions which your opponent might get into turn 1, right? So if your opponent advances a unit, right, they might advance a unit 4 or 5 inches over to here, and they might try to get behind this piece of terrain. Maybe they're trying to cleanse, right? They're getting here early to cleanse an objective, or they're trying to, score a secondary objective. Maybe they have something like established locus and they're trying to get to, close to the middle of the battlefield here. But they're going to be putting something cheap right here, maybe like a squad of Chaos Marines or perhaps a squad of Intercessors or something like that, right? Now, what a lot of players will do is they will take the Shining Spears and they will just ram the Shining Spears straight into this unit. Now, you could do that and you'll probably kill the unit, right? You can move forward 16, you can, kind of shoot them, and then you can charge them and kill them and then be on an objective. The problem with this is that units like Intercessors are not that expensive. They're 80 points, and they've already scored their secondary, so you're probably not going to get the most value out of your Shining Spears that way, right? The other problem with this is that it's going to be hard to consolidate into any area that you don't have, well, that you know, are safe from. So let me give you that example. So we're going to move forward 16 inches. Now, when you move forward, you should move forward in a position that you can actually also shoot in. So I would probably move to like something like this right here, so we can shoot all of these models into these guys before we charge it. So we shoot our weapons. We're probably going to kill about 2 Space Marines here. So maybe they, you know, they kill off 2 Marines for you. And then you charge in, right? You charge, get everything in base that can get in base, which would be this. Probably not going to roll super high on your charge. You can't guarantee that. So it's going to be something like this, right? And you're going to kill the rest of the Marines. Now, here's the problem with that. And a lot of people think these guys suck because once they charge in and do their damage, they're just kind of stuck out here in the open. The only thing they can do is consolidate on these objectives, right? And that's true. That's not how you want to use these guys, right? So we're playing hammer and anvil here, which means there is shorter horizontal distance on the battlefield. This kind of plays to the Shining Spear's strengths a little bit, to be honest with you, because you're going to see more often than not, opponents are going to be, you know, kind of more exposed because of it. All right, so this is what you don't want to do because you've traded badly, you haven't scored an objective, and now your opponent can easily kill these guys without exposing their units, right? So that's not good. So instead, so we're not going to do that. That's not a good move. Instead, we're gonna try to kill this unit with something else, right? We don't need to kill them with the Shining Spears. What we can do instead is what is essentially this. We can move them over here. Now, I know that a lot of people will take a look at that and say, oh, Proxy Hammer, why would we do that, right? Shoot. What are they, like right there? So we want to move them the 16 inches. I didn't move them the full distance, that's why. So 16 gets them right here, just behind this ruin. But if we push them a little farther, we can actually, with an advance roll, we can get them to about right here, right? So we can get models on the objective, so we can take the objective away from our opponent. That's what you want to do, right? You want to be able to advance, get onto the objective here, and take it away from our opponent. Now our opponent can't score the objective, right? Now the unit's still alive, that's true, but it's a couple things we can do from here. So A, we can set it up so that these guys can only assault us, and we can put a unit of Howling Banshees right here, right? So let me just show you real quick what we can do. We can set up a unit of Howling Banshees right behind these guys, and we can give ourselves, we can put our opponent in a bad position. Yes, if he charges these guys in to our Shining Spears, let's kind of maneuver these guys a little better. He can probably make that charge, but he is going to get wiped out by the Howling Banshees in return, right? The Howling Banshees are going to come in and wipe them out. So that's guaranteed, right? Howling Banshees kill about 4 models. He'll get to attack with the Sergeant, and the Sergeant is just not going to really be able to do a lot, right? So that's a bad move for our opponent there. Now, what we could also do is we could also just move something up to engage these guys. Like if you have Striking Scorpions, if you have Wind Riders, if you're playing Wind Rider Host, you can easily destroy this unit with shooting. But the advantage to having the Shining Spears here now is that now they can look at how much threat they can target. They can basically move 16 inches to here and threaten anything in your opponent's backfield, right? They can threaten your home objective with the 16-inch move. They can kill or tie up any of these things here. Now, the one thing I will say is the Redemptor Dreadnought, not going to be a great choice unless you have some support. So you'd have to come in with some, you know, Wind Riders, shoot this thing a little bit first, and then wipe it out with the Shining Spears. They do need support against those tougher tanks. But you can definitely stop this Rhino from being able to get around, right? You can basically move 16 inches. Whoops. Well, you can move 16. They're right about here. Jeez. Okay, there we go. Move 16 right about here. And they'll be safe from Overwatch here, by the way. And then you could just charge them in. Not a long charge, 5 inches. That's fine. Move them in here. They charge in. Now your opponent cannot move this Rhino this direction, right? If your opponent wanted to move here through this gap, which Rhinos can do, and just to show you guys, Rhinos can easily move through that gap on terrain layout 7, which is what we're on. Wave Serpents cannot. Rhinos can. And then they could just plop something on the center objective. We don't want to allow them to do that, so we can just charge in here. So we can do that, or we can just wait for something very important to come out, right? We can have them right here. It's okay if they're right here because they can't be shot at, and our Howling Banshees can just heroically intervene against anything that comes up. So we've essentially secured this area of the board right here by just making it impossible for our opponents to do anything except for put models on physically on the objective. The only thing they can do, guys, is just put more OC than us on the objective. And yeah, they can do that, but we're going to have some other ways of dealing with that. We're going to have some other ways of preventing that in our army, right? So that's one thing you want to do. So again, it's a mistake just to throw your Shining Spears away into some regular old Chaos Marines. Now, on the other side of the battlefield, there's actually something else we can do. And I want to show you kind of this strategy as well. Now, on the other side of the battlefield, and this is going to be true of most battlefields, right? If we're like right, well, we can just use this unit, but we're going to use this unit as an example, right? We're like right here with this unit. They're kind of hidden behind here. And our opponent moves something a little bit expensive right here that has 3 wounds apiece, right? A more expensive type of unit, maybe some Terminators, maybe they move up some Chosen, right? Something like that. What we can do is we can pick a fight with those models. So we can move up here, we can move our 16 inches right there. And if we want to advance, we can even advance. Now, the advantage, again, to having the Wind Rider host is that you can advance D6. So if you get like a 3-inch advance, you can get right up to the wall, and that's an easy charge from behind, right? You can easily get these guys into this position to charge and kill your opponent. But, you know, let's say that maybe you don't have that. You can still always just charge normally. From that distance, it should be pretty easy to do that. If they are chosen, you will kill most of them. You will kill about 4 models on average dice, right? You're hitting on 3s, you're wounding on 2+, and they're only getting a 5-up save against your regulars, and against your Exarch, they're only getting a 6-up save. So you're going to be able to kill most of them, and you're going to make a good trade because they are very expensive. Chosen are an expensive unit. Now, your opponent's not going to just give you this, right? Your opponent's going to try to not give you their Chosen so easily. So having a unit of Shining Spears just sitting there is a good deterrent to stop your opponent from getting their Chosen into position to, you know, destroy your other units. Chosen can charge into things like Falcons, they can charge into Wraith Lords, and they can do very decent damage. Now, I say Wraith Lords because Chosen have the ability through the Chaos special rule, the Dark Pacts, they can get lethal hits, sustained hits, or dev wounds, and 2 of those things are pretty good against Wraith Lords. You'd be surprised now that Wraith Lords are, you know, toughness 10. I believe Chosen are a little bit harder hitting against them. I don't know exactly what their strength is. I think they're like, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they're strength 5. But they get some decent ranged weapons as well. And they have the ability to have those lethal hits. So my Wraith Lords personally last in the index got charged by Chosen, and Chosen were able to take out a Wraith Lord. So it's possible, right? So being able to protect your, even your tougher units against a heavy hitting unit like Chosen is very important. Now, once you kill this unit here, right? Once you destroy these guys, you can always consolidate 6 back onto the objective, right? And that's the kind of thing you should be looking out for with Shining Spears, because you don't want to just trade evenly. You want to be able to destroy your target and then move back onto an objective like this so that your opponent has a tougher time targeting you. Now, if your opponent wants to target you, they have to do this, right? They have to go all the way around here to be able to target you. Basically, they have to be right here in this area or walk onto this to be able to shoot you. They can't shoot you from safety back here, which means that if they go up here, they're vulnerable, right? Yeah, they can shoot your Shining Spears, but you're also going to be able to kill whatever they bring out. Intercessors are not going to be able to kill Shining Spears. I'm sorry, guys. They're just not. I heard somebody say in one of my videos, oh, intercessors can just blow Shining Spears out of the water. 5 intercessors will only kill perhaps only 2 Shining Spears. So, boom, boom, your regular Shining Spears will probably die, if that. And actually, guys, the average is they'll do 3.5 wounds, which is, either they kill 2 Shining Spears or they only kill 1, right? So you'll still have your Exarch. Your Exarch can then move using the Fade Back Battle Focus ability. So there's some options there. There's definitely some options. The other thing you can do is, let's say you don't kill the whole unit, right? Like a lot of players were saying, well, it's kind of a luck thing. You may not be able to kill the whole unit. Okay, let's say you kill 4 of these guys, right? Let's say you kill everything but the sergeant. The sergeant attacks. Maybe he kills like 1 Shining Spear, right? So now he's in combat with these 2 guys. Actually, we'll put the Exarch back in there. We don't want him to die. So now your opponent has a pretty unfortunate choice to make, right? You're on the objective, you're controlling the objective, and your opponent can either stay in combat and essentially just die the next turn, right? Because it's your opponent's turn. So your Shining Spears are going to be able to strike before this Chaos Marine does, right? This Chosen Marine, you're going to have the priority during the regular fighting step to choose to just kill him, which you will do. So your opponent's probably going to want to fall back or want to bring in backup, right? If your opponent falls back, this is what you can do. If it's not battle shocked and it's not going to die anyway, you can use Opportunity Seized. So Opportunity Seized is another battle focus ability that allows you to move d6 plus 1. Well, guess what? If your opponent wants to fall back, we can just do this, right? We can just go back behind this ruin here. And then our opponent can't do anything about it, right? So yeah, your opponent can fall back, but you're just going to move behind the wall. So now they can't be shot at. Your opponent, unless they have some sort of fallback and charge, I think Chosen actually do have fallback and charge, which is fine. But if you're able to fall back here, even if your opponent then moves forward into here, they're betting that they're going to be able to kill 2 Shining Spears, and I guarantee you, a single Chosen is not going to be able to kill 2 Shining Spears without some ridiculous luck, right? So it's just not going to really happen, especially since you can't shoot him as well. Like, if this guy's like a plasma pistol, you're not going to be able to, get to a point where you can shoot the plasma pistol and kill the Shining Spear Exarch. It's just not going to happen. So Shining Spears, to be effective, really do need a ton of battle focus points kind of put into them. This is a unit that you really want to start just kind of feeding battle focus tokens into to be effective. Okay, so the other thing is, and that's basically, if you guys are wondering how lists with like 3 squads of 6 Shining Spears could operate effectively, this is how, right? The list is hitting something super hard, killing it, And then, you know, basically they lose maybe 1 or 2 models in return of the first shooting attack, and then they just move behind a ruin with fade back. Or if your opponent falls back, they're going to use opportunity seized. This is a unit that really benefits a lot from battle focus tokens. Okay, so here's the other way that you can use them. You can actually use them in rapid ingress. I think this is probably the best way to do it. And especially if you have the Wind Rider host attachment, because you can kill something, you can do all this stuff, and then during your opponent's turn, the end of your opponent's turn, these guys, if they're still on here, they could just go back right into reserve, right? They can go back right into reserve. And they can come in during your opponent's next turn, wherever they want, right? They could even come in back here. And what they can do then is they can move 16 inches forward, maybe even an advance and charge, and then they can charge this tank in the backfield, right? And again, they're not going to kill the tank, but they're going to stop it from being able to shoot your other units. So this 120-point unit has killed a unit of Chosen. It has fallen back to safety, where it can't really be shot at. It has gone back into reserve, and then a couple turns later, you bring them out again in rapid ingress, and you're able to tie up an enemy tank in the backfield. Or you're able to take out a key infantry unit in the backfield that was, you know, kind of holding the home objective. Something like that, right? That is what you definitely want to do each and every time you use this squad. You have to think about, what is this squad going to do now, but also what do I want this squad to do 2 turns from now when I rapid ingress in, right? So yeah, this unit, is it as, you know, clean and simple to use as any other aspect warrior? No, it is one of the hardest aspect warriors to use, but if you invest the right amount in it, it can do a lot of work for you. And let me just show you what this unit kind of on average does to a unit of Chosen. So I'm using Chosen as an example because they're a very common unit. So at least in Chaos Marines, right? We're going to start to see a lot more, you know, kind of 3 wound infantry and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and roll our dice. So we're going to hit on 3s against Chosen. Hopefully I don't roll really bad here. Yeah, that's about average, right? So well, that's a little above average, but that's okay. Now we're going to wound on 2s. Yeah, there we go. That evens out, right? So they're going to need to take 4 5-ups and 1. I mean, that was really bad for the Exarch, but let's just see what they roll, right? They're saving on 5s and 6s. So yeah, that's 3 dead. Terrible roll, but that's 3 Chosen killed, right? So that's most of the unit. With the laser lances, they'll probably be able to kill another one. Let's do it again. Let's see. Oh, and by the way, I very much suggest that if you really can't like kill all the models, use a command reroll, right? Use a command reroll. So this is a good, well, this probably you don't want to use a command reroll, but if any of your Exarch's attacks like really fail, then use a command reroll. It's fine. There's certain breakpoints that are going to allow you to either wipe the unit out completely or leave 1 model left. And if it's one of those situations where it's like, oh, you know, they're going to have 2 models left attacking me, use the command reroll. It's going to save you a model, right? So yeah, so this is 4 dead. This is 4 Chosen dead. And that's pretty solid results. That's about average of what their combat should do. And again, that leaves them with 1 model left. If they fall back, then you can use opportunity seized. And if they don't fall back, then you will fight first and you will kill them in their turn. So to me, that's a unit that's going to win combat against Chosen 9 times out of 10. Right? So that's pretty good. Even against Terminators, though, these guys do pretty well against Terminators as well. They only wound on 3s against Terminators, but that's still pretty good. So against Terminators, right, most of them hit. We're wounding on 3s. I don't know why this is not rolling. Here we go. Okay, so this is a good example of when we'd probably maybe want to use a command reroll on one of these. synergies, right? Maybe for a CP, use a command reroll. There we go. So now our opponent rolls their dice. That's going to kill a whole Terminator squad. You're probably not going to get this result. You're probably just going to get 3 kills here. But that's still pretty good, right? 3 kills on a Terminator unit is pretty solid. They're going to attack you back, but on average dice, what are they getting? 4 attacks apiece? I can't remember what Terminators get. I think it's like 3 attacks, actually. Let's say it's 3 with Power Fists. Hitting on 3s, wounding on 2s, 4 saves. You'll probably lose the 2 Shining Spears, but you won't lose the Exarch, right? Yeah, you won't lose the Exarch unless you fail all the saves. And that's a good trade because you're going to be able to attack back the next turn. Again, unless they fall back, and then you could just scoot away. So you're going to get these 4 attacks with the Exarch the next turn. Oops. 2 hits. Hopefully we can kill the rest of them. Maybe not. Yeah, that's a bummer. But that's still pretty decent. You know, that was a bad roll. But you guys get what I mean, right? They're a 120-point unit, and they're trading pretty good against those 3 wound infantry units that they can charge into. So that is going to be pretty, they're pretty decent. I like them better against things like Chosen. Against Terminators, they have that, 4+ invul save, so sometimes it's just not going to be that effective. Against 8-bound, they're not bad. So 8-bound do get fight on death, but if they're just running a squad of 3, you can do a lot of damage to them. You can come in and do some serious damage to a squad of 8-bound and possibly kill all of them on the charge. So yeah, Shining Spears, they really just want to pick their targets effectively, right? They want to pick good targets for their charges and stuff. And there's going to be some matchups where you're not going to find a good target, right? There's going to be matchups, for example, against Chaos Space Marines, where they're just giving you a bunch of cultists, right? They're just running a bunch of cultists. Or your opponent's just running a bunch of, if they're an Eldar player, that's probably the worst matchup is against Eldar. They're not running any Wraithguard. So yeah, that's not going to be that good. I think the main argument against Shining Spears is that because they're so niche, they're not that good into a lot of matchups, right? Against certain armies. But there are some units in those armies that they are going to be good against, right? Like against any Marine faction, they're going to be good. Against pretty much any Tyranid army, they're going to be good. They're going to be good into things like Genestealer Cult, because Genestealer Cult have those aberrant models that they like to use. I can't remember the ones that have like the 3 wounds each. Yeah, I can't remember what they're called, but they're like, pretty beefy. They're good against that. They're good against Ogrins. They're good against Bulgrins, right? Those kind of units, they hit really hard against. I think Bulgrins are actually probably not that good because they wound on 4s, but they can still kill quite a few of them, especially with shooting and combat combined. These guys are really good against Tyranid warriors. I spoke about that earlier. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things that these guys are good against. The only things I can think of that they're not going to be good against, Horde armies, really bad against Horde armies. If you're going up against some sort of Horde, they're not going to be effective. But you just have to use them in a different way. In that game, they could be, scoring you secondary objectives or perhaps move blocking the Horde or something like that if they're not going to really do much to it. And I know it sucks to use the unit that way, but if you are using a unit of Shining Spears and let's say a Wind Rider host, yeah, your host wants to shoot that Horde. And if you need to buy yourself a turn, use those Shining Spears, right? Yeah, and that's basically it. That's kind of all I got. Those are some of the tricks you can use with these guys. I think the biggest trick though that and what I really like to do is pair them up with Howling Banshees, because Howling Banshees cover the weaknesses of the Shining Spears. Shining Spears, they don't like getting charged. Howling Banshees can heroically intervene. and kill whatever unit is, trying to charge in, right? So if it's like infantry, flying infantry, whatever, they can easily deal with that. If you want to be cheeky and put your shining spears 1.1 inches away from the wall right here on this side, that's a really good strategy because monsters and vehicles can't get to you. Only infantry can, like, fly over you, right? Flying infantry. So it's going to be very hard for them to be able to charge you effectively. They're going to have to go all the way around. And then once they go around, you got Howling Banshees right there, right? So, yeah, you do have to position these guys well. They do need the right targets, but if you can find the right targets, you position them well, they can be very good. All right, guys, we're going to go back to the video in just a second. So we'll kind of finish up with a conclusion, and then we'll end for today. All right, so in conclusion, Shining Spears are tricky to use, but extremely effective against the right targets. The problems they face are things that you would normally have to account for when running them, right? You have to build your list with these guys in mind. So that means you need to build an army that is okay using 2 battle focus tokens on them to be effective. You have to build an army that has something like advance and charge or lethal intent or extra rerolls with them, because for 120 points, just their base profiles are not quite enough to get the most out of them. You need to be able to stage these guys effectively and make sure that they can trade up against enemy units, and that sometimes means being patient. A lot of people don't like to be patient with Eldar units. They kind of think, well, I'm going to throw this unit out and it's going to trade effectively, and that's what Eldar are all about. That is not quite what Eldar are all about. I think there's a big misconception out there, especially now, that Eldar units are just meant for trading and that is it. And that's just simply not the case. Especially with a unit like this, you have to be a little bit smarter about how you use them. You have to make sure that you are making it as hard as possible for your opponent to do anything about what your game plans are. So being able to charge these guys into something, kill that target, and then consolidate back behind terrain onto an objective of yours, something like that, should be something you're planning for ahead of time. However, if you are able to overcome the challenges that the Shining Spears present, they can be a really good choice in a lot of matchups. These guys are really good against armies like Tyrannid. We're going to be facing a lot of 3-wound infantry, things like warriors. These guys destroy warriors fairly easily. They're also extremely good into things like Neuro Tyrants, those kind of like squishier monster kind of units. These guys will absolutely devastate if they can get their shooting and combat off, which again is something you do have to plan for. I really like these guys personally in Wind Rider Host. I think if I really had to give these guys kind of a rating of how good they are in a serious way, I don't think they're useful in any detachment besides the 3 I mentioned: Aspect Warriors, Wind Rider Host, and Ynnari. And personally, I think they're just better in Wind Rider Host, and they are a very close second in Ynnari. The only reason they lose out in Ynnari is because I think there are other units that are probably going to be a more choice selection in that type of list, right? You have access to Incubi, you have access to Howling Banshees, and those units are typically just going to be better in a Ynnari list because they are more easily tradable, and you really are looking to trade a lot of units in Ynnari throughout the course of the game so you can get a lot of extra movements out of your models. And Shining Spears, while good, are probably only going to be used maybe a little bit in Ynnari, but not that much. I actually think that this unit is best in Wind Rider Host, because in Wind Rider Host, you get that nice advance and charge, you can get that extra 7 inches of movement after you kill a target with shooting, and there's a possibility that once they do kill their target, if they're able to get back to safety, you can just pop them in reserve and rapid ingress them in the future, which is something that they should be doing, really, because rapid ingress is a very good way to use them in the late game. So, yeah, Shining Spears, are they the best Aspect Warrior out there? Absolutely not, but they do have a solid ability to, kill heavy infantry, 3-wound infantry, things like Chosen, Chaos Space Marines. I mean, I believe the new Slaanesh, the Noise Marines, are also going to be 3 wounds apiece. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But I think they're 3 wounds apiece, and these guys just tear them a new one. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of targets that Shining Spears are very good against. You just need to, they're kind of more niche. They are a niche aspect warrior. They're not going to be great in every single situation. You really do have to be patient and pick your fights properly. Okay, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you guys kind of have a better understanding of how Shining Spears work and why they're good and what they're good into. And let me know what you guys think in the comments. I don't think 120 points is necessarily too expensive for this unit. They could be better with a points decrease, but I really do think that GW kind of had the understanding with this unit that it was more of a unit that's going to be used in a very few detachments, you know, either Ynnari or, you know, Wind Rider host, and maybe Aspect host, but not, you know, not much outside of that, right? This is a very niche unit that is only going to be in certain armies. That's just what it is, right? Kind of like Wind Riders, right? Wind Riders are going to be in a lot of... Wind Riders are more solid, I think, in general in more detachments, but they're best in Wind Rider host and, you know, stuff like that, or Ynnari. You know, they're really good in certain detachments, and I think Shining Spears are kind of the same way. All right, guys, that is going to be it. Again, let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I will see you guys next time. For all of my patrons and supporters, thank you so much for continuing to support and watching the videos. I really do appreciate that. You have made the channel much better over the years. And if you want to join the Patreon, I will leave the link in the description. It's totally free. You can talk to people like me and other Aeldari enthusiasts who love talking about strategies, tactics, and of course, hobbying. I'm also going to leave the links for my Amazon affiliate and my channel store page in the description so you guys can grab some discounted Eldar minis on Amazon or some Eldar inspired apparel on the channel store page. All right, everybody, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.